Hi everyone and welcome, this is the Apostate Prophet. I hope you're all having a great week. We had a great live chat on Tuesday. I loved it very much. The participation, the questions, otherwise the comments were awesome. Thank you all so much for that. We will surely see each other in another Q&A video very soon. I'm here with you to talk about Jews. Of course I'm going to talk about Jews because I am allegedly a secret Jew and I'm also paid by Israel, just like any other ex-Muslim out there. Therefore, I will gladly reveal all the Islamic hate about Jews, how it is found in masses in Islamic scripture, and also how that hate is manifested in Islamic history. Before that, I want to thank all the great people who support me on Patreon. My channel is not monetized and never will be, so you can watch my videos freely without any ads. If you want to support my cause and receive benefits, the link to Patreon is in the description. Thank you all so much, no matter in what way you support me. When we talk about Islamic anti-Semitism today, people love to bring up Israel, and they try to somehow explain that this hate for Jews in the Islamic world is because of the Israel problem. It's quite weird that they give us this explanation, but then they also say that the world shouldn't judge Islam and Muslims based on terrorist organizations like ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Very hypocritical. If we look further into the Quran, the Hadith, scholars, and Islamic history, we will find out that what they are telling us is very far away from the truth. The hatred of Jews starts with the beginnings of Islam. Muhammad was not only the first Muslim, he was also the first Jew-hating Muslim, and created such a path that billions have shamelessly walked on. I want to start the analysis with a research by the ADL. It is a research that I'm very familiar with, not because I work with Mossad, it's because I used to work with a big research company that works with many organizations, and the ADL was one of them. This ADL project is called the Global 100. In that study, you can see that Muslim-dominated countries are by far the most anti-Semitic countries in the world. There is a huge gap in anti-Semitic sentiments between Muslim countries and non-Muslim countries. This is even true for Muslim-dominant countries that are far away from Israel, such as Malaysia, Indonesia, Morocco, and more. Now, many people claim that the extreme level of Jew hatred among Muslims comes from the Israel problem. But what do countries that are so far away from the Arabs and so far away from Israel have anything to do with this? And what a justification is this? You have extreme prejudice, conspiracy theories, and hate against a religious or ethno-religious group because of the state of Israel? No. An interesting detail in the study is that most Muslim respondents declare that they never met a Jew in real life, and many of them say that they get their opinions on Jews from the TV. So the argument that is used against Islamophobia very much, like that people have never met Muslims but they are prejudiced against Muslims, is actually very much true in terms of the Islamic world and Jews. Let's focus on where they get the news from. They get the news from TV. I am of Turkish descent. I lived quite a long time in Turkey. I can tell you that TV in the Islamic world, or social media, or newspapers, online websites, mosques, and so many other sources and places are full of chauvinist Muslim propaganda against the West, against Christians, Jews, atheists, apostates, and so on. Also against homosexuals, by the way. But they are extremely full of propaganda against Jews, America, and Israel. You couldn't even find an equivalent in the West that is similar to the media in the Islamic world. A quite regular news channel in the Islamic world can look like your banned and hated neo-Nazi publication in the West somewhere. The hate and propaganda against Jews is not only because of Israel. No one really believes that, and if anyone really chooses to believe that, then that's pure hypocrisy. As mentioned, hating Muslims due to ISIS or Al-Qaeda is kind of the equivalent of that. It's even much easier than hating Jews based on Israel. So let's see where Muslims and their scholars and the Islamic world get their hate from. As you can guess, it is nothing less than the fundamentals of Islam. It all starts with the Quran, but be patient. The Quran is very hateful, but the Hadith that are still followed by the majority of Muslims in this world are much more extremely hateful of Christians and Jews. Let's look at the Quran first. In this video, I want to focus more on sources that are specifically about anti-Semitism, and sometimes also anti-Christian. Now, this is my favorite verse of the Quran in this matter because it displays very briefly how Islam hates the religious groups that it claims to be linked to. The Jews say Ezra is the son of Allah, and the Christians say the Messiah is the son of Allah. That is their statement from their mouths. They imitate the saying of those who disbelieved before them. May Allah destroy them. How are they deluded? This verse is not only factually wrong and stupid, it is also incredibly intolerant and very hateful in its language. It compares Christians and Jews to polytheists that it describes as filthy, calls them deluded, and says, may Allah destroy them. Why Allah speaks of Allah is a mystery, but whatever. This verse says clearly that Jews and Christians are always against Muslims, and they will never be fine with you unless you follow their religion. The opposite is true today. Allah was apparently horribly wrong. In chapter 4, verse 160, it says that Jews were wrongdoers, and that God, who the Quran claims is Allah, punished the Jews therefore by forbidding them from many freedoms and pleasures. That's quite a weird generalization by the just and almighty Allah. In this part of the Quran, specifically in chapter 2, verse 88, the Quran says that Allah has cursed the Jews and the Christians for their transgressions and also for their disbelief in some prophets. The Quran does this because Christians and Jews vastly choose to reject Muhammad. In this part of the Quran, it says that Jews were given instructions by Allah, but then they turned away. It doesn't say many or some, it says you turned away, and you refers to Jews. Then it continues by saying that Allah turned many of those Jews who broke the Sabbath and who committed otherwise transgressions into apes and pigs and made people hate them. This is mentioned in 3 parts of the Quran. And many Muslims over the last 1,400 years and today have called Jews descendants of pigs and monkeys. And they are still doing so in many places among many different Muslims. Apparently, Islam rejects evolution, but it believes in a different form of evolution, or devolution, whatever you call it. In chapter 5, verse 41, it lists some people who believe everything they hear, and it also lists some of the Jews, or many of the Jews in that category. It refers to them as people who believe any lie. The Quran also says that Christians will be closer to Muslims than Jews. It says that Jews and pagans are enemies of Islam. And they will always be hostile against Islam. This part does not really praise Christianity or Christians. Chronologically, more recent verses condemn Christians and call them infidels. Finally, in another part of this very peaceful and tolerant book, it says that the majority of Christians and Jews are perverted transgressors. Now, this is only the Quran, but you can see if you look at the Quran, and if you look for verses that refer to Jews and Christians, that the Quran is extremely intolerant of those. In the beginnings of the Quran, in the beginnings of Islam, chronologically, Muhammad was a bit more careful with Christians and Jews, and he was more friendly to them. But then when he saw that Christians and Jews reject him, and they don't like him at all, he started to curse them, and he started to be against them, to fight them, to give orders to fight against them. And he was especially angry with the Jews. So much that he started to expel Jews tribe by tribe from Medina, his place where he fled to from Mecca. The intolerance of Jews in the Quran is not possible to be ignored, but the Hadith are even worse. The most important thing in Hadith about Jews is a prophecy regarding the end of times. This prophecy is repeated multiple times in the Hadith, and Muhammad says in there that Jews will fight the Muslims, and that everyone, even the trees and stones, will call on the Muslims and say, "O Muslim, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." The weird and terrifying Hadith also say that there will be a gargat tree that will not inform Muslims about Jews, because that tree is the tree of the Jews. So let's just stay on this for a second. The Hadith, so Muhammad says that every tree and stone will tell the Muslims about the Jews and will ask the Muslims to kill the Jews. And there will be one tree which is a traitor tree. That tree is called Gargat, and that tree belongs to the Jews. That's why the tree will not reveal the location of the Jew. Muslim conspiracy theorists keep creating stories about Jews planting that tree everywhere in Israel because they know they will be slaughtered by the glorious Muslims and they want to save themselves. This hadith is not just a random combination of words or anything. This hadith is very well known in the Islamic world and often used even on platforms like Facebook that removes contra-Islamic content immediately but doesn't really care if you talk about annihilating all Jews, especially if you use it in a language that is predominantly used by Muslims. As you can see, it is insane. Muhammad was insane about Jews. And Muhammad has his very, very important prophecy, part of the end time prophecies, that Jews will fight the Muslims, that even stones and trees will tell the Muslims about the Jews, and that the Muslims will slaughter the Jews. In other narrations, Muhammad says that he will kick Christians and Jews out of the Arabian Peninsula, and he will only leave Muslims there on the Arabian Peninsula. Very, very, very tolerant, isn't it? Other hadith even say that Allah will throw a Jew or a Christian in hell for every Muslim who dies, in order for the Muslim to go to paradise instead. Can you imagine that? Allah will throw a Jew or a Christian in hell for every Muslim who dies, so that the Muslim can go to paradise. What a lovely religion. Other hadith also mention that you should not befriend Christians and Jews, and that is also mentioned in a Quran verse. The order goes like, if you befriend Jews and Christians, then you are one of them. An interpretation of that order by the scholar Ibn Ishaq says that Allah revealed this order because some Muslims maintain friendships with Jews. Ibn Ishaq is a very early scholar and many of his statements are considered dubious by later scholars, but his books are read nevertheless, and early Muslims, just like other Muslims in recent centuries, respect his writings. And finally, a historic atrocity committed by Muslims, just like a lot of atrocities committed by Muslims. The killing of an entire tribe of Jews by Muslims, just based on accusations by Muslims. In a series of hadith, the hadith explain that Muhammad exiled all Jews and Jewish tribes from the city of Medina and allowed only one tribe to stay, the Banu Qurayza tribe. Only after a battle with the polytheists, Muhammad was suddenly visited by Gabriel, who told him to pay a visit to the tribe of Banu Qurayza. Muhammad did so and beheaded all their men who reached puberty. He took their wealth, their women, and their children, and distributed them among his Muslim followers. This is an undeniable part of Islam. It is a fundamental part of Islam. And it shows that Muhammad was just like Hitler, maybe even worse. I will make a video that I will dedicate specifically to this horrible massacre, the massacre of the Banu Qurayza. As you can see, the hatred for Jews is deeply rooted in the fundamentals of the religion of peace. When people tell you that Islam is totally tolerant, and was always tolerant, and that accusations of anti-Semitism are only results of prejudice and Islamophobia, then they are lying, or they are truly ignorant about their religion, or the religion they choose to defend. The hate for Jews is Islamic, and if you grow up in a Muslim family almost anywhere, you are very, very likely subjected to very early indoctrination of hate against Jews. That hate was in my family, it was among my relatives, and so many other Muslims that I knew. Pretty much every Muslim family that I have ever seen. You learn to hate them, to associate them with pigs, with evil and oppression, and you also learn that Jews are almost all deceitful, jealous, disgusting plotters, who carry the curse of Allah, and who will be slaughtered by the Muslims before the day of judgment. No wonder so many Muslims take the liberty to spread lies and conspiracy theories about the Jews, just the way Hitler and his followers and his new followers spread conspiracy theories about them. No wonder Mein Kampf is so popular in the Islamic world. No wonder so many Muslims around the world use the swastika in this context, and no wonder they can make marches where they wish death and destruction on Jews and Israel, just like the global Al-Quds March that was done just days ago under the guise of anti-Zionism. It was held in the Islamic world, in Europe and in North America. That hate comes directly from the religion of Islam itself, and Israel is only a scapegoat. Believe me, I took only some of all the examples among the Quran and the Hadith. I didn't even go into the rulings of scholars that are also a fundamental part of Islam. And I didn't even go into the treatment of Jews in the dark history of Islam. And that history is really dark. But I will go into history, and I will explain the Islamic war on Jews in another video, which will be a sequel to this one. And soon after that, I will present my take on the whole Israel issue. So stay tuned, and thanks for watching. If you like this video and my cause, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and to share. My channel is not monetized, so if you want to support me on Patreon, the link is below in the description. I appreciate your support very, very much, no matter in what way you choose to support me. I will be back next week. Have a great weekend, be outspoken and brave, and stay the hell away from Islam.